Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. In a few minutes we'll catch up with Darren Thornton. He's the co-writer and director of comedy For Mothers. But first, our correspondent Maximilian Driver catches up with Trevor Courtney, who's the director of Holt, at a special preview screening of this new Irish animation.
This is Max Driver interviewing Trevor Courtney for Film Ireland. Okay. Hi Trevor.
Hi Max, how's it going?
All good. So, for listeners who might not know about Holt yet, how would you describe it in one sentence? And what makes it stand out from other animated shows out there?
It is a action cartoon for 6 to 9 year olds, and it's the greatest animation show in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing it, so I'm sure that'll be true. What inspired you to create this show? Were there any personal experiences or stories that played a big role in shaping it?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm here, by the way, just with Julie Rush, who's one of the directors, and Paul Dowling, who's the main composer. And we would have grown up with cartoons like He-Man, Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, Transformers, and it would have been these kind of cartoons that made us get up out of bed on a Saturday morning and eat our cereal and enjoy Saturday mornings of just luxury of one cartoon back to back. So usually monsters having fights was our favourite thing, and that inspired us the most, that we weren't really seeing it enough, so we wanted to make our own one, and this is the one we made.
Yeah. Saturday morning cartoons was a tradition passed on in my household from my parents, so I can definitely relate to that. It's one of the things I definitely will reminisce about my childhood as I get older. So, yeah. What's been the most rewarding part of directing this show so far? And has it taught you anything new about animation or storytelling?
It's the first thing that we've made where it's 26 episodes, so it's quite long. And instead of just, it's like, you hit like the reset button at the beginning of each episode that we'd be used to. This had an arc that ran through the whole of the 26 episodes. So writing it would have been a bigger dynamic than we'd be used to kind of doing. From a directing perspective, it definitely had a lot of fight scenes. So that would have been for myself and Julie to a bit, more heavy on storyboards as opposed to just doing conversational pieces and things like that, or comedy. And for Paul, anything different with you with the music for Holt?
Well, just that it was great to be able to do an homage to the cartoons that we grew up with. So it was all about having a very particular synthy, fun, action-packed music, which lets you put the music out to the front a lot more, other than having to have it behind conversations and dialogue. So
great. How do you make sure the show is fun and engaging for kids, but also something parents will enjoy watching too?
I think parents will enjoy watching it because it will be nostalgic. It will feel a little bit like the cartoons they would have watched when they're younger. I'm a parent, so like for me, it would have that kind of feeling attached to it. Like it would be a homage to like 80s cartoons. What was the other question? The comedy?
No, something like how the show is fun and enjoyable for kids.
It's 3 kids that are stranded and they're on their own. So they are trying to find their way home. So they're lost. So to have that kind of danger element to it is, I think, captivating for kids because they put themselves in the mindsets of the characters. And I think when they form Holt, they feel invincible because Holt is able to beat up monsters and stuff. So I think to have that protection kind of safety thing around, but they have to work together, and the characters all have very different personality types as well. So hopefully it will engage a lot of people.
Great. Now that you've established yourself in the world of animation, what advice do you have for aspiring creators who want to get into the industry?
I would say either pick one job that you want to do instead of many. I think it's hard to be a generalist because you don't get good at everything. If you want to be a background artist, keep drawing backgrounds. Just kind of stick with it until you get to a certain level, and hopefully once you get your break, then the industry will take you in and then you'll have a good security after that.
Great. If you could swap places with any animated character for a day, who would it be? And what would you do?
Oh my God, He-Man. I'd just walk around telling everybody I'm He-Man, and I'd stand around with my sword out and just go around on a cat all day.
Yeah. Good answer. What was your favourite animated movie or show from when you were a kid?
I think the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and there was another cartoon called Inhumanoids that nobody remembers, where there was Earth Core and they went down and they had fights with monsters at the centre of the Earth, but there was a lot of monsters and I liked the monsters having fights with each other. And Godzilla cartoon, yeah, because Godzilla always had a fight with another monster.
If you had to pick one song for the theme song of your life, what would it be?
The Dandy Warhol's Bohemian Like You.
Can you elaborate on that, on why you think it would be your theme song?
It was just my favourite song for a while, but now that I've said it out loud, I don't know if it is anymore, but it was my favourite song for a while and I did love it, and it definitely was kind of just in the genre of music that I would have been in around during college and stuff.
Great. And finally, what's one animated character you'd love to have as your best friend?
He-Man. I have to be He-Man again. Yeah. If He-Man came to the party with me, it'd be pretty cool.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Trevor. I hope Holt really takes off. And yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me, Max. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Max. Holt will air Monday on RT2 on the RT player at 3:55pm. Now we're delighted to welcome Four Mothers co-writer and director Darren Thornton. So first, let's have a listen to the trailer.
I can't take it anymore. All she wants to do is smoke fags and watch telly.
My one keeps turning up at wakes for people she doesn't even know. Oh my God, there's Simon.
She looks wrecked.
Hi.
Good morning, Edward.
Oh my God, she speaks.
If you were going any slower, we would go back in time.
Why do you keep pointing at every turn?
Why are you in therapy?
I don't know, Mom. Okay, I'm a writer. I'm neurotic.
Repeat after me. I'm going to stop.
Taking care of other people and start taking care of myself.
Well, I'm going to say it straight up. Janine gave us all an education this week.
Hello?
Hi, Edward. We've decided to run away to Maspaloma's Pride for 3 days and leave our mums with you. Sorry.
Who abandons their mothers to go to Maspaloma's Pride of all things?
My son has abandoned me with strangers.
None of us asked to be here in the first place, you know.
I'm gonna have to bring a sleeping bag in here. Well, where am I gonna sleep?
This could only happen to you.
This is the universe taking a shit on it.
Edward, you can't cope.
Mom, we're gonna have to make this work. We can do it together.
You've been looking after other people for 5 years.
You have to
What? What do I have to what?
live. Live your life.
I like being on my own.
Weird.
It's not weird, Mom.
What was his father like?
Weird.
Mom!
Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're delighted. So it's Four Mothers. I've been waiting for this to come out for a very long time, and I've seen it a little while ago. It's such a fabulous, fun, heartfelt, emotionally honest, action-packed film with such brilliant characterization. So it's just such a fun film. And before we start diving into the ins and outs of how it came to be, everyone knows you and everyone knows your fabulous films and your back catalogue, but I was wondering if you could just take us through your journey into getting into film, everything that led up to you writing and producing your brilliant features.
Yeah, so I get to go way back. It was always from when I was a kid and stuff like that. Me and Colin, my brother, who I work with mostly, we were both film geeks. and as kids just lived in the cinema all the time in our local cinema. We would usually be seen on Friday nights going to the two screen Abbey Cinema in Drogheda to see Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 when we were like 11 and stuff like that. And I think they just got exhausted by us and let us into anything at that stage. So there was this great lady who worked at the counter there that, we just had a great rapport with. And, so we got into whatever we wanted and stuff like that. And so, yeah, so we were just, I guess, film geeks from a young age. I certainly always wanted to direct. Colin was kind of went through a period where he wanted to be an actor for a while and stuff like that, and did some actor training. But we always knew film was where we wanted to end up in some capacity. And then we kind of fell into youth theatre, became a really important space for us as teenagers, where we just discovered that we could tell stories and that people would want to see them, and so that movement was so energizing, and that led to, I guess, a sort of we went a different route. We went into theatre first because there was an immediacy to working in theatre that we discovered through youth theatre, where we discovered that we can write these stories and we can get them in front of an audience in 3 or 4 weeks of rehearsal, and then something's up and it's on, and so that became really addictive in a way. Every time we looked at, we were still making films during that period, but they were very much like community-based things that we were doing with digital cameras and stuff like that.
It's in terms of it, like as a medium, theatre really lends itself to like exploration of character, and I think that's something that's always like it's almost like in films the focus might be on the plot. There's always an emotional arc to it, but with theatre it's the emotional arc and the character. And do you feel like that's maybe where you started cultivating your voice as creators and getting into that, or would that always have been something that you would have been drawn to in films
I
as well?
mean, definitely that was like theater was, I wouldn't in a million years have thought that most of our time would be taken up with writing scripts. And it is, directing is every couple of years. If you're lucky, you get to, this very brief window of time where you're on set and you're directing, or you're in an editing room and stuff like that. But most of the time is spent writing screenplays for us, or, and I never would have thought that was where we'd have landed. And that happened when we were in the theatre space, when we were devising shows with a group of other actors and just kind of coming up with ideas, and then sort of discovering, we're quite good at being able to understand character arcs and at being able to we had a good ear for dialogue. And so all of those things, those discoveries were made when we were working in theatre. And that sort of, the first thing that we did professionally as a filmmaker was a TV series called Love Is a Drug back in 2004, and that was adapted directly from a play that we had devised. So yeah, one very much spoke to the other.
And then in terms of then, yeah, like moving into that cinematic realm, like growing up in that youth theater world, and probably understanding as well, like like having that knowledge of how actors work and what's it like being in that space, then gaining the technical skills and the experience and on-set experience to then work on your own projects. What was that sort of chapter like?
It was like it's sort of parallel to me doing the theater stuff. I was also in Coláiste Dúlaigh doing media production, like the 3-year diploma in media production, which I remember at that time was like, I think there was only 3 courses that had any sort of film production element to them in Ireland at the time. It was like there was obviously Dun Laoghaire, and then there was I think DCU, a course in DCU which was more theoretical, and then there was the Rathmines course, and the points for all of those were beyond what I wasn't a particularly great academic student and stuff like that, so I didn't get near them and stuff. And then the Coláiste Dooley course was more practical in terms of you brought your bits and pieces in that you'd made and they assessed those. And I had loads of little films that I'd made in school and that kind of thing. So I got a place in there. So all the practical stuff in terms of filmmaking, I wouldn't even say that, and this is not to slight the course or anything, but I was lucky in that like I kind of met a bunch of people in college there who were really into, the technical aspect of filmmaking and stuff like that. And I was able to kind of, hang out with them, learn from them and make things and do things with them. And so that practical physical aspect of film production sort of fused with the more performance-based stuff that I was doing with the theater company. And actually the first sort of proper filmic stuff that I was doing was video material for the mixed media theater shows that we were doing at that time. Like we were using a video component to our theater work in a way that I don't think had really been done before at that time.
You're kind of now starting to, develop your skills, develop your theater work into something more, like suitable for a screen. You're building your network. You're kind of, growing as a creative. Did you have like a day job at any point, say, adjacent to the film industry? What would you have been working in, and did that sort of feed into it?
I mean, I still do. You know what I mean? I'm sure, like like as filmmakers, if you're and the success of Honora and Sean Baker's, many speeches about this topic speaks to that. Like the day job. There's always, you need something financially secure to survive, no matter. Unless you're fortunate enough to get high-end TV or Marvel jobs or something like that, you're constantly living, paycheck to paycheck and trying to survive and stuff like that. So yeah, I did have right now myself and Colin teach a lot. We teach a lot of screen acting and stuff like that, and that supplements our income and gives us time to write because writing takes so long. And back at the beginning, I also was teaching. I was teaching in various youth reach centres, mostly in Drogheda Youth Reach, but also other youth reach centres around the country. I kind of fell into and actually started teaching when I was about 18 or 19. So I was really young. I remember when I started, I was like a year older than the students in the centre. But that was brilliant. Again, and that was instrumental in terms of us becoming filmmakers as well, because what happened in Youth Reach at the time was they were looking for people to do creative projects with the young people. And I was, really interested in just putting into practice all the things that I was learning about filmmaking at the time and stuff. So we started making these movies with the teenagers. And it was great because we would get a little bit of money from a couple of grand from like the curriculum development unit. I remember Dermot Stokes ran it at the time. He was really into what we were doing, so we would get some money from those guys to actually be able to hire a crew and get like I remember they bought us one of those cameras at the time. Remember those cameras they shot 28 days later on as well, those early high def was it JVC or something? I can't remember what the make was. They were red and white and black. They were kind of like everywhere for a while. So we had one of these in this youth reach center, and I think we spent a couple of years just shooting tons of little short movies with the teenagers and stuff on them. And that became, it was great just from the point of view of learning stuff, crafting short films and story, and also just directing non-actors in terms of the teenagers and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a really fun period as well. And it led to, we did this bigger program called Sharp Focus, where we worked with a much more sort of formal kind of project where we produced short films with teenagers on both sides of the border about the legacy of conflict in Northern Ireland. And that early work that we did around the youth reach centres really sort of was foundational in terms of that much bigger project then that we would do Sharp Focus further down the line.
So leading up to a date for Mad Mary. So while you're doing this, are you guys kind of sitting in a room hashing out ideas, going, what's the next feature step? And then in terms of maybe like festival success and kind of proving yourself so that you get enough money for a feature, like talk to me about like getting up that.
I mean, it's weird because we did Love Is a Drug, the TV show, and like that was such a that took a couple of years, 3 years, which now is probably it's not that long at all, but at the time it felt endless. And sort of completed that and it aired, and I thought, oh, the doors to everything are going to swing open now, and I'm just going to step into Hollywood and be given the reins to the next. I don't know, whatever Harry Potter franchise. They're going to be knocking on my door, and of course, nothing like that happens at all, nor should it have. And I had so many struggles with making the TV series, just on a very practical level. You kind of go on to something thinking that you know everything, and you realize very quickly that you know nothing at all. And so I kind of felt like after doing Love's a Drug, I need to go back and kind of just, master the basics in a way. And so I worked on this short film called Frankie, and that worked out really well, and it was on the festival circuit, and it got a lot of attention on the festival circuit. And then somewhere around that time, after that, we started working on a feature, and we worked on this feature for about 2 years, and then we just couldn't crack it. And we were doing that with David Collins in Samson Films, and it was great. There was a lot of good stuff in it. We just couldn't get it over the line.
That in terms of like having it come together as a narrative piece? Is that in terms of financing it? Is that
No, it was more just from a script point of view. It was just like we had these great characters that we couldn't find their story, and we wrote many different versions of it, and none of them, it just wasn't coalescing properly. And sometimes that happens where you have, like, we've got a ton of characters that we were just trying to find, that we think we've got a story for them, and then we go, oh no, that actually doesn't work. And so those characters are floating around in your brain for years, and then something else comes along. It's like, oh, that's the perfect avenue for them. And in a way, A Day from Mad Mary was uh, built on part of a character that was in that story that we loved, because that story was about a girl who got out of prison, and it was about her relationship with this young guy who was a drug dealer on this particular estate in North Dublin. And anyway, that didn't work, but we really liked her, and we really liked her energy. And at the same time, I was working on a play with Yasmin Akram, and I started to I basically took the prison backstory from the movie that we were working on. I said to Yaz, why don't you add this to this character that we're working on? I think that would really kind of set it alive and stuff. And we did that. And as a play, it really worked. And so after that, we went, you know what, let's try and adapt this as a film, and just do it quickly and not question it too much, and see if it works. And it did. That script came together in about 6 or 7 weeks. The first draft did anyway. And we got like we brought it to Element, and they said yes almost straight away. We went to Screen Ireland, and they said yes pretty quickly too. So it's funny, we'd spent a couple of years before with the other script trying to write the best Irish film of all time ever, ever, ever. And you can kind of tie yourself in knots and just never get past go when you do that. And sometimes when you step away from it and just kind of try to do something in a sort of fast burst, it can come together really well.
Isn't it funny that there's almost like a magic in the air then around like certain projects? Because I think you're saying about the best film of all time, like that's on so many people's lists.
The great can be the enemy of the good is the old thing, and it really can. Sometimes good enough, you have to kind of go, all right, it's good, and good is good for now. You know what I mean? And like we definitely suffer with that sort of like trying to overwork something and trying to yeah, definitely both on script and in the edit and stuff like that. You can really kind of kill something, with your love for it and with your desire for it to be great. So it's always kind of useful to have people around you that can pull you back from the brink of that and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a thing.
And getting that then across the line, and the process of, yeah, like having that script that went together, getting that money in, getting into production. Is there anything now, like looking back and it being like 9 years later, is it? Like then when it came out, is it 9?
It was 2016, yeah. So that's what, nine years ago, yeah.
Yeah, that it's yeah, like is there anything now in retrospect that you're like, oh, I've learned a lot since then, or I learned a lot from that?
Yeah, loads. I mean, you kind of like it's that thing with all of them. It's like film school. Each one is a whole, and you think, oh, I got it all figured out now, and then you do the next thing, and there's just a whole bunch of new things. You're like, oh fuck, I didn't, never didn't know about that, or didn't, and so. And then there is this, there's a certain, for me anyway, there's like a bunch of mistakes that I seem destined to keep making over and over again. There's things that's just fundamentally baked into your DNA that you're kind of always wrestling with. But yeah, certainly with the day from Mad Mary, there was loads of stuff, loads and loads of things that and now I'm trying to go, what were they? But like, there was definitely a lot of learning. I mean, I think there was a lot of sort of stepping out from the other side of it and kind of going, okay, well, at least we can trust in ourselves a little bit more now. And certainly on Four Mothers, I think one of the things that was maybe a little bit easier was that I remember on A Day from Mad Mary that we were really anxious about whether whether the humor was going to work at all. Because on the page, people were like, it's so funny. And then when we cut it, people were like, I don't know if this is actually funny at all and stuff. And we were like, I think it will be in front of an audience, but and me and Colin tend to approach things where we're trying to make the performances really subtle and not just sort of observational in a way. And so you're talking to the cast about making sure that they're not trying to make each other laugh, or that they're not trying to lean into the comedy in any sort of major way, that it's, yeah, like I say, observational and stuff.
It's really interesting. Just a very specific thing there. What would that like tip be? Just say like that, if people are just going to like it too big and that kind of way that you're not going to throw someone. What are the type of notes? I just think that's very interesting because especially from given that theater background.
What are the notes? I usually kind of talk to them at the beginning of it. Like I'll kind of try and have like a day, maybe you're lucky to get a day or a couple of hours, or maybe a couple of hours stretched over a couple of days where you get to kind of read the script together or just talk about the script and stuff like that and kind of go, look, don't think of this as a comedy. Think of it as a drama. Think of it as that everything, and no matter how absurd it is, and this was particularly relevant with Four Mothers, which is a lot of absurdity, a lot of things that are sort of arch comedically and stuff like that. And you're kind of going, no matter how ridiculous it is on the page, you just really have to find the truth with it and really don't try to make. There's a sort of a thing with actors where, and I would talk about this with them, where you kind of go, look, I know you want to, you're going to feel better if the crew are around the back of the monitor kind of chuckling away, and we're all kind of like, oh, great, it's gratifying and it feels good. But as sure as night follows day, you'll get into the editing room then, and it will just be shit, and it'll be really boring, and it won't be funny. And there's this weird thing about in film where if it's everyone's laughing on the day, it's just not funny when you get into the edit and stuff like that. So that tends to be sort of reassuring for them, and they tend to trust it a little bit more after we've had that conversation. And then usually we're on the set, we're just kind of, I don't need to, give that many notes, it's faster or slower or whatever, or don't, if I feel like someone's winking too much with someone, kind of go, oh, you're leaning into that too much or whatever, don't. And sometimes actors will really question it and not be sure. Fionnula on Four Mothers, I know she there were times where she was like, I feel like and it was hard for Fionnula because she was, obviously she didn't get to speak in the movie at all. It was very much the camera just sitting in front of her and having her trust that there was so little that she needed to do to communicate so much and stuff like that. But that's a big ask for an actor, and I think yeah, getting her to go along with that at times, there was a bit of discussion and negotiation, and but yeah, those are kind of the conversations. Really in prep, you just try and have those conversations so that when you're on set, everyone kind of knows, and you're not having to, have big discussions and stuff. But anyway, to loop back to what I was saying before, like that was a big like on Four Mothers, that was easier. It was easier for us to trust that that the comedy will sort of bubble up to the surface. It won't be in the first cut of the film. We're going to look at it and not think it's very funny. In the second cut, we could be looking at it. It won't be maybe until quite close to the end, and when we put it in front of people, that will realize, okay, that humor is there.
And oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so we'll go into the minutiae of this, but I do want to go back specifically into pacing at some point. So I'm just even making a little
Yeah,
bend your
yeah.
pen in this because that's very
Yeah,
like a sort of
yeah.
interesting point. So in that 9 years, so Mad Mary came out, smash hit. It's on everyone's list. It's I presume like warmed audiences' hearts everywhere, touched people emotionally. Like it was just one of those films that is on everyone's like, oh yeah, that was just one of the
Well, I don't know if like I'd love to think that were true. I don't know. Like I think that it has a very like there is for the from the people that have seen it and stuff, there's a lot of warmth and love for it, I think. But it's not, but it's quite difficult to find and stuff like that. Like weirdly, it never really landed on a streamer. So it's kind of one of those. I think like bizarrely, most people seem to have seen it from at different times when it was fans would post it on YouTube or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I know, yeah. And I'm kind of like on the one hand, kind of going, "Oh, it's frustrating." On the other hand, going, "Well, it's the only way people are going to see it. So what can you do?" You know. So I don't know. Like like anytime it's mentioned to me by people who liked it, they tend to say, "Oh, yeah, that was that movie that only a handful of people have seen, but it was good and stuff like that." So it's great, but it didn't actually get so widely viewed, you
God, I
know.
know those people as writers that would use it as their comps, where they'd be like, "Oh, it's like this meets this." That it's
Right, okay,
yes,
that's so interesting. I think in Ireland probably
yeah.
like definitely a lot like because it had a cinema release here and all that kind of thing, and so I think it had a place here. It was much harder to get traction in overseas and stuff like that. But anyway, sorry, I've moved off the
Yeah, no,
point.
that's just really interesting. And then okay, anyway, that came out. That was obviously a huge success. Was it? So like that moment after Love is the Drug when you're like, yeah, no, it's here. Like what was it like sort of your steps then in between in those 9 years? Like is that a lot?
I mean, like I'll tell you, so Four Mothers was born out like basically literally in 2016. Myself and Colin were in Los Angeles, showing a day from I'd married some agents and stuff over there. We got on a plane at LAX and got a phone call from family that my mum was unwell and very seriously so. And so that changed the trajectory of everything then. So we got home, she needed sort of care. And so myself and Colin and like quite a bit of it, and my mum's sister and my dad, it was going to take the four of us working in rotation to be able to manage what she was going to need during that period of time. And so really, we just kind of threw ourselves into that. We were trying to write at the same time, but I think anyone who's had that been a carer kind of knows it's like I guess when you've got I imagine I don't have children, but I imagine it's similar to having a baby and stuff like that. Where you don't really have the headspace to write properly. We were trying to do bits and pieces, but not really getting anything done and stuff. And then at a certain point, mid-August lunch came into our lives, and because we were living that sort of thing, albeit in a maybe not as lighthearted a way as was depicted in that great film, we thought let's fuse a bit of what we're sort of living right now with this, with the sort of an adaptation of mid-August lunch. So that's where, and then, we started working on that. And then, of course, COVID hit. We were supposed to shoot 2020, COVID hit, and then that sort of delays everything again. So yeah, that's why 9 years.
9 years. And so I got to see it at a really great Screen Ireland sort of conference like a long, long time ago. Yet it's only quite recently hit the big screen. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that because it is quite a story.
That's Yeah, that is the kind of wild thing with sometimes it's just you finish the film and you think, okay, great, now it's ready, let's go. And then no, it doesn't. You're like waiting for it to land. You have to wait for the right festival launch for it. And we made this with a view to hopefully getting it into Sundance. We worked around the clock to finish everything in time for the Sundance deadline, got it in, it didn't get into Sundance. Now they were really nice and they were, told us it came close and all that blah blah, but it didn't land there. And so then you kind of end up on this sort of we did on this torturous kind of thing where you're waiting for it to find a festival home. And with each rejection, there's just this feeling of, oh my God, this film's awful. What did we do? We misjudged everything. It's, not good, not funny, not interesting, blah, blah, blah. And that went on for us. And then we had this, it took what, 5, 6 months before it landed in London.
London is a great crowd.
London is brilliant, and we had such a good experience there. We were in London with the date from Mad Mary, and it was a great festival and just a great experience. And the same thing this time. I mean, we had again like we didn't have a or when we did have a test screening, sorry, very early on, we didn't have a cast and crew at this point. So the first time I was ever in front of an audience was the first night in London, and we didn't know what we had, you know what I mean? But it was a great screening. It was just really, it was full of laughter, and everyone seemed to be with it the whole way through. So there was just such an enormous sense of relief when it finally played.
Yeah. Oh God, I'd say so after working on it for so long. Do you also find is there for something so close to home and writing something and like that and it kind of like being that joyous but then emotional turmoil but friction and conflict and funny. Is there a catharsis in it or are there beats when it was difficult to
I mean, both. I mean, more than difficult, like utterly depressing and like this, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it was cathartic. Writing it was cathartic because we needed to so we had it was such a we were in a state of grief after we lost our mum and stuff like that, and that was really kind of intense, and we needed to just we were writing other scripts, and we noticed that we were writing suddenly they we were writing about mother son relationships in scripts that weren't really about that, but we obviously needed to exercise that in some way. And so we put all our focus then into Four Mothers, into working on that, and because we needed to just give a voice to all that stuff that, all the memories and just a celebration of our mum and stuff like that. Um, so that was cathartic. And then just in terms of yeah, there's so many times during it then where you're just despairing, you know what I mean? Um, on this, the shoot was kind of felt easy enough. The edit on A Day for Mad Mary as well was pretty tough going, both of them. And so there's a lot of dark moments of the soul and stuff like that when you're in the 10 weeks into the cut and you're going, what is this? I don't know. We've kind of, you know what I mean?
how do you know those beats aren't working as they're going together? Like, is it just you're kind of there's a scene and you can't get it to that?
It's not so much as seen as just a sort of the sequences. Yeah, it can be seen, it can be elements in the scene, but you're trying to find the film's heartbeat. Really, you're trying to find. It's not that one thing is kind. It's just that there's bigger. Usually, actually, but in both the case of Four Mothers and A Day for Mad Mary, what we discovered was that we have a blind spot around the start of our movies, and this is kind of interesting from a filmmaker's point of view, right? Because what happens when you get close to the shoot or production, obviously, is that everyone's like, you need to cut the pages down, you need to get the script down, you need to get it into a manageable thing that we can fit into a schedule and all that kind of thing. So you start to kind of cut into the script, and you think, oh, okay, well, we can cut a little bit here and cut a little bit there, and you can. It can be kind of dangerous because you can end up taking out some really, really some stuff that looks like it's not hugely important, but it has its own little bit of life or something like that. So what we found with both A Day for Mad Mary and Four Mothers is that we are the first 20 pages of our scripts read great, like they move like lightning, and but we cut on the page, we cut them so tight that there's sometimes not in both of those films anyway, there wasn't enough time for the relationship between the two central characters to really breathe and have life, and for the audience to connect fully with them. We were being too strident with them in terms of the way that it was in the script, and then we shot what we had in the script, and then it didn't become clear to us until we were into the cut. Like when we watched assemblies and stuff, I felt like, oh no, that's going to be okay. When we get in and massage that in the actual proper edit, I'm sure that's going to be okay. But actually, there was something problematic baked in there where we didn't give it enough space, and so that was sort of key to figuring out both the issue with A Day for Mad Mary and the issue with Four Mothers when we were in the edit. So
What was the fix? How did you?
the fix was that we needed to there was sort of we needed to reconceive the opening partially in the edit, and then we needed to go back and do an additional scene that was going to deepen the relationship between the two main characters. It's weird. Like a lot of people, when they have to pick something up, or it tends to be an issue with the ending of the film. And for both me and Colin, it's always been the start. And even when I go back to like Frankie, I didn't have to pick anything up for that, but the problem was baked into the start. And even with our short two hearts as well, it's a funny old thing. I don't know what it is with us, but there's definitely a blind spot there for us where we tend to just be too strident with the openings of our stories.
And in terms of how the structure of your collaboration works, in terms of then writing and then through to the filmmaking. So you're directing it, but is he there every single day going, no, we missed a bit. This is a
Yeah, he's there. He's there every day. He's at the monitor as well. I'll sort of look over at him, and he has this very particular nod that he does that means yes, or the sort of head shake if he kind of thinks maybe there's something missing or whatever. But also Colin will he went out with second unit to do some car bits and bobs this time around and that kind of thing. So yeah, he's on the shoot a lot. He's less around in the cut. Then he'll look at various bits and pieces every weekend as I come out of the editing room and stuff like that. So we've got like a fresh set of eyes and stuff and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's always been quite easy between the two of us. Like we've never fought over anything, script wise or edit wise or anything like that. It's an easy relationship.
Brilliant. Yeah, because I'd say things get pretty hairy, especially when you're like, yeah, you were saying week 10 and you're like, something isn't right. And
Yeah.
how did you guys kind of figure out that was the thing that was pinpointed? If that was a blind spot, was it like you're showing to people and they're like, I don't get it? Or is it something that you feel instinctively in your gut is wrong?
It's something that I feel instinctively once it gets to a certain point, I'm like, oh, why am I not feeling anything here? And you go, oh, okay, it's because the track has not been laid properly in this opening or in this part of the film. So I'm not. So when it gets to when you get to the sort of mid-act point where it's sort of the more the film's emotionality is bubbling to the surface in a certain way, if you're not really feeling anything, then it's I haven't set that up. And also if the comedy's just not really working, it's because there's no investment there in the character. So yeah, so that's what we discovered. But yeah, so I'm hoping now that the fact that we've made that mistake twice, that on the next thing we won't make it again. Let's make a different mistake next time.
Because it's so again wonderful. It's funny. I think what's really funny is there's the larger than life characters, but like everyone feels so fully rounded. It feels like at any point you can kind of move from where your camera is to the lives of any of the characters, and there's something actually authentically happening there, and they have their own arcs and movement and like threads woven throughout. That like and again with this is the thing. Okay, like in Four Mothers, there's a lot of threads. There's a lot of different stories and characters and people and lives that are intertwined that do have to resolve. Like, how was balancing that? And again, like, I think the timing and pacing in terms of the jokes.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I would say a lot of the stuff with the ladies in particular was did we discovered while we were shooting. Like I added a couple of little things with a few little buttons. Like there's one moment where we see them one of the mornings where they wake up and we sort of get to see each of them on their own for a moment, waking up and what, if Jean is sort of like her struggling with her mobility in that moment and just looking at the walker and seeing what's ahead of her and Maud is sort of reading one of Edward's books called Gay Bar and stuff like that, and Rosie's sort of watching people spotting from the window, and Alma is looking at a video of her late husband and stuff like that. And so those moments, like as we were assembling during the shoot, I was kind of going, you know what, we need to hang out with the women for just a little bit of time here. Like we're spending a lot of time with Edward and his book, and there's a real danger that the audience are going to feel like the women are being sidelined in some way, that we're not getting enough of their point of view. And even though it was just those small moments, they were really sort of lending a little bit of weight to how the women were feeling in this moment and what was happening. Because the story, I think all the stories that me and Colin are really interested in are about loneliness. You know, A Day for Mad Mary is about loneliness. Frankie and Two Hearts are about loneliness. And this is, it's a comedy, but it's also very much about people who are dealing with loneliness and trying to connect, trying to be seen by other people and to see other people and stuff. And so, on the page, there's just things that sometimes you think it's all there. And then when you start, you're going, oh, that's not popping clearly enough, or that needs to be underlined more. And particularly with comedy, you just need to be watching it so carefully as you're shooting and stuff, and making sure that that the emotional stakes of the story are there. And so yeah. So I guess sorry, that was long-winded, but um, with those character arcs, there was quite a lot that we would have discovered while we were filming. A lot of it was on the page, but then there were things that we were finding as we were going along.
And in terms of, and I do think this is it was the thing that I was struck by in the most of the film, like by the film the most. And I think it was the authenticity of just the range of characters, of just like everybody, and how everyone had their own space and their own thoughts and their own feelings, and how they felt so like true, and like even in the situations that they were like empowered, or I think there's just a massive empathy in this film in a way, like that's, as a viewer, you get their worlds in this deep way. And I'm just wondering, is that something that you guys sort of build, or are these women are you kind of stealing their characters from people that you know?
Okay, both. Definitely. There's a lot of with the women. There's a lot of Mam, obviously, in Alma. There's a lot of my mum's sisters and some of the other characters, and then some of my mum's friends, and then just other people that we don't know that well and stuff like that. So there's little, but not in any. There's little, there's small details and elements, rather than we're writing this person that we know. You know what I mean? There's like, and then they're also, an actor is going to come and they're going to have their own ideas and bring their own elements to it. And some of the things that you may have thought were important to the character, actually, when this actor comes in and does it, oh, then that's not important. This thing here is much more interesting. So I think what you're thinking about is one of the most important part of the whole process for me and Colin, beyond the script, is just getting the casting right. And so we'll spend a lot of time making sure that we get just the right actors, and that they're going to there's a sort of yin and yang qualities to it. So for example, with Alma is a good example, because because she's written in there's a softness to her. I mean, she's quite abrasive with the messages and stuff like that, but you could, if you cast someone who's very soft and gentle and immediately sort of like a teddy bear, then it's going to be a hat and a hat in a way. It's too much with the warmth of that character anyway, and the impediments that she's dealing with. And Fionnula is wonderful at being sort of like, she's she's got so much fierceness, and even just in her expression and stuff like that. You think about her in the others in the Alejandro Amenabar film, and how scary she was in that, and then and loads of other roles. So it was just, when we came on that idea, it was like, it was thrilling. You're kind of going, just the warmth of that character with the juxtaposed with Fionnula's sort of innately tough nature and stuff like that is just going to be really interesting. So you're always looking for that sort of yin and yang in the casting that's going to bring out another flavor in the writing. And so, yeah, so I guess that, in terms of empathy, that's a lot of it comes, in stages and stuff like that. And by making the characters as fully dimensional as you can through the script and through the casting, I think you get that empathy from the audience.
And in terms of, so this now as a project and a date for Mad Berries as the kind of the previous one, was there it's like you know, like when people have their slate and it's like it's just that this happened to be the one that came up, or was this very much so that no, this is it. This is we know this is the one that we're doing right now, or was it a case of like, look, we've all of our projects. This is the one that sort of came together in that way at that point.
Um, we yeah, it just I think this kind of came together. We were working on another script at the same time, it's a script we love, but we can't. Again, it's like the one we were doing for Samson that I was talking about earlier on. This one was with Element for a while. At some point, we hope we'll figure it out, but it's like it's a sort of multi-stranded drama for teenagers. It didn't have a strong enough like it wasn't propositional enough as a movie. And so we're trying to figure out if television is a better avenue for it or what to do with it. But it's got some of the best writing that we've done. It's just, trying to find a home for it. But anyway, the point being
Young adult
we were
novel?
potentially, yeah, who knows?
You can make it, yeah, you've no kind of cap on that. You can go as expensive as you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go as long as we want. So anyway, we were working on both of those concurrently, and then formulas just seemed to click into place quicker. So yeah, and it's oftentimes it's the one that you're not as focused on that sort of, inches ahead. The one that you're kind of killing yourself over, is can sometimes take a bit longer to get over the mark.
So this, and then we'll go back to like sitting in the audience in London and watching it with people and finally being like getting to share that experience was like, okay, up until that point, was there like an element of nerves? Like when you kind of like finished it for the Sundance deadline, were you like, no, we know we have the magic. We know we have the magic now until until the setbacks that you're like, or and you finally got to share it in London. Is there a little bit of nerves before you go in and set it down, or was it just a relief that you've been grafting on this for so long and you finally get it out?
Both, but certainly a lot of nerves around London in advance of its screening. I remember we just not sure. You just don't really know how it's going to play.
Well, we all loved it in our screening that
Yeah, and I remember that. I
yeah.
remember that screen. I wasn't there for that. Colin was there, and he was really sort of reassured. And I think he was probably going into London with more confidence than I. Not that I didn't have confidence in it, but I was probably a bit more anxious than he was because he had had that experience of the marketing screening where he'd seen it with a group before. I'd not. We had a sort of a very late test screening just before we picture locked, like a year and a half before that. And I wasn't at that either, which is very weird. Usually a director would be at that, but I ended up being in London because we were editing at the time. Colin went to the cast and crew, and I remember he had a phone in the room that I was listening to on the other end with the editor, and we obviously recorded the sounds of the audience and stuff like that as they were watching it and stuff. But so I'd never seen the film with anyone beyond just the editor and the producers before that London screening. And so and I even hadn't watched it with them for like a year and a half at this point. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking. It was nerve-wracking going into that and stuff.
And now it's getting a general release and it's going out into the world. And it'll be in cinemas and people will get their tickets and get their popcorn and go see it. How do you feel about this now? Is that exciting?
Again, like hopeful, nervous, all the usual stuff, hoping that it sort of lands with people, driving myself crazy, kind of going, are we getting any engagement online? Are people talking about it? Are people excited about it? It's all that stuff that you've no control over, but that you just sort of obsess about and stuff like that. And but then the funny thing is I was supposed to be away directing something in Canada for this whole period, which I was excited about because I was like, oh, it'll be great. I'll get to miss that whole period of it coming out, and I won't have to engage with the anxiety of worrying how people react to it. But then for various reasons, I couldn't take this job last minute, and so now I am here for it. So, but you know what? It's funny because there's so much of it that's great, and that's just exhilarating and lovely to. One of the things that's really nice is that after, I was in LA with it last week, and we were in Chicago with it a few weeks ago, and a couple of the festivals and stuff like that. And there's this lovely thing where after the screening, people who have been carers themselves come up for a chat, and there's something. I don't know. There's something about having that, I get to talk about my mum with them and they talk about whoever it is that they've lost. And there's something really, again, cathartic or just lovely about those conversations and just the sense because they haven't the role of a caregiver and stuff like that is not something you tend to see that much in cinema. So it's nice that people are feeling seen in that way and that we're having discussions about it and that we're able to share our experiences and that kind of thing. So that's been really nice, So I guess that concurrent with the just the general anxiety of like a film coming out and stuff.
Yeah, and I couldn't recommend it more. It's just just beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's enjoyable. It's sad. It's hilarious. There's just so much to it that yeah, that I kind of look forward to watching people's reactions and seeing it with a kind of bigger audience again that will be able to see themselves in a way that maybe aren't necessarily reflected properly on screen. And I mean that for everyone. I mean that for like the entire cast because I think what is there is so authentic. But again, like it's just not the kind of things that you would normally kind of capture on like, a crime thriller where people are like
Yeah.
solving a murder and everyone looks gorgeous and they're 20,
That's the
even though
thing,
they're really
'cause
accomplished. Yeah.
there's so few, like comedy has become so hard, or comedy and drama have become so hard to get people to come out to see in the cinemas. And it's such a good experience. There's nothing I like more than going to the cinema and being in a busy cinema looking at something that's funny because you really have such a good time with it. But for whatever reason, it's just really hard now to get comedies into cinema, and it's difficult to get it's difficult to get audiences out to see anything now, but it's particularly hard obviously if it's not a horror or a comic book movie, but it's particularly hard with comedy. But I do think that there's just the right thing needs to land. I think that will change. The right film will break through. Obviously Kneecap was a huge success last year, and that's amazing, and hopefully more things like that will begin to happen, not just in Ireland, but internationally and stuff like that. We'll have, you think back to like, 15, 20 years ago when you had like big tentpole comedies coming out all the time and how great that was to be able to go and see them on a Friday night with a full cinema and stuff.
Yeah. I know. But I do think this is very funny that there's like and you can imagine then seeing it with a group of people that like the energy of it, that kind of laughter through it, that I definitely would be one that, yeah, that you, if you capture it with a group and women and older and middle-aged and older women like us, we're better off like we pay more. We're the people that pay more for cinema tickets like across Europe. That we're more of the
Yeah.
audience. So we do go. And I'm like, I totally think that's true because we go in groups as well. That I think, and like that's the thing that will resonate. But yeah, like it's just such a sort of like wholesome, but like not like rude and funny and crass and
Yeah.
vulgar and messy. So it's just, and it's anyway, so I can't recommend it more. Um like, and to catch it on the big screen and just really well crafted. And this is the thing I can't get over is there's just so much in it. Like there's
Mm.
so much of a world built into it. So definitely one of the best. I'll put that now on my list of classics that it's such a one to watch. And in terms of what's next out of the gate, is it still loneliness? Like,
It's still loneliness and comedy. So we're doing this now. I'm probably going to jinx it because I've already spoken about it. But I remember the last time we were talking about the film we were going to do after a day from Mad Mary. And of course, that didn't happen. So we'll probably jinx this by talking about it. But anyway, it's we're working on this comedy about a gay couple that are kind of inspired by the Colm and Billy characters in some way, that are informed mothers, who are the two boys who leave their parents, right? So they're a couple with a dysfunctional relationship, and at the start of this new movie, they arrange a threesome with somebody. But the guy that they arrange a threesome with, he's like a gym instructor in a CrossFit gym, and he body shames them basically and doesn't go through with the threesome. And then they become obsessed with him and his gym and CrossFit because they, for whatever reason. And so they join their own CrossFit gym, which is kind of like, not a very good CrossFit gym. And they become obsessed with winning the Filthy 150, which is this CrossFit tournament, and beating the other gym with the sort of A gays in it and stuff like that. So it's like, I guess, kind of a sport comedy in the mold of something like Dodgeball, or like one of those, those sort of 80s, like Michael Ritchie kind of comedies and stuff. So yeah, so we're hoping that one comes together. And it's actually, again, it's that, you know, it's a sort of on the surface a high concept comedy, but it's also really about them as a couple and how they, you know, are struggling to relate to one another. All that good stuff.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. Okay, so you'll have to come back and chat with us about that one soon, and hopefully not 9 years. So,
yeah, hopefully not 10 years. Hopefully not 10 years.
Oh, but thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you, Gemma. I really enjoyed that. Thanks a million.
So Four Mothers is in cinemas this weekend. Make sure to catch it on the big screen. If you enjoyed this podcast, like, rate and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform of choice.